Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure.
By accident. Somebody
Alrighty, folks. We have with us for the next panel Jim Sorensen and Ryan King. And they're going to tell us about a different version of the G1 cartoon that we almost got.
It's true, we are. So I imagine that most people in this room are familiar that in 1984 there was a 3-episode miniseries for Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye, and then a 13-episode first season that started just a few weeks later that ran weekly. What I think is less common knowledge that the fans didn't know until the early 2000s is that there was almost a completely different Transformers Season 1 that would have been on the CBS network. Especially back in the 80s, you could either run your programming on syndication, which meant that you produced it yourself and you shopped it around to all the different networks, so you try and sell it to a station in Chicago, and a station in LA, a station in New York, or you could sell it to a network like CBS or ABC or NBC. And of course, it's a lot easier to sell it just to one network and a lot more prestigious. But there also comes many rules for that. So we're going to go through the story of how and why this is the case. And our story begins in 1979, let's say, I'm going to pick an arbitrary point, when there was a giant spike in gasoline prices, in oil prices. There was regime change in Iran, and it drove the price of oil way up. Now, I know this isn't something that we can relate to today. But in the 80s, you could see on the graph this huge spike, and it made everything plastic, but it made everything more expensive. It made everything plastic extremely more expensive, and the toy companies had to respond by downsizing their toys. Hasbro, in particular, in the 60s and 70s, had great success with their G.I. Joe line of 12-inch action figures, sort of Barbie for boys. But they couldn't do that. They discontinued the line in 76 amid falling sales and increasing prices. But can anyone tell me the top-selling toy in 1980? 80. Anybody take a guess?
Cabbage Patch?
Not Cabbage Patch.
Star Wars.
You're very close. No. Star Wars is actually very close. In fact, come on up. But the actual top-selling toy was the Rubik's Cube. But that's true. But the top-selling action figure in 1980 was Star Wars. Who said Star Wars? Come on up. Yeah. Seriously, come on. We got one for you.
And what we're giving away today, we have copies of what we're going to be going over today. One, you get to choose one. We have the original First Bible, or a copy of it, the second draft of the First Bible, and the draft of the first pilot episode for Transformers.
So you can pick one.
You can pick one.
Well, but we'll keep going on while you choose. So the top-selling action figure in 1980 was Star Wars, and this drove the Hasbro executives nuts because this was a Kenner toy, and from their point of view, it was smaller, it was less intricate, it was less detailed, it was an inferior toy, but why was it selling so well? Well, we're going to enter Kirk Bozigian, who was the product manager, the head of boys' toys at Hasbro, and he realized correctly that the reason that Star Wars was the #1 selling action figure in 1980 was because of the fantasy It was because they were engaging the minds of the kids with these big stories. And he said, why don't we do that ourselves? Let's not try and license the next Star Wars. Let's try and create our own. And they relaunched G.I. Joe as a real American hero in 1982. And they had the toy line, of course. They had the comic books. And crucially, they had an advertising campaign. So I'll show you an ad.
He's been kidnapped by Cobra. We have no alternative. Call in G.I. Joe X for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. You'll stay till the fight's won. We will show you off. The master man, he's in control. The Legend of G.I. Joe, you from Marvel Comics.
So there's something you might notice about that. That was not an ad for the G.I. Joe toy line. That was an ad for the G.I. Joe comic book. Now the reason was, if you were advertising toys, there were strict rules about how much animation you could do versus how much of the toy you could show. But if you were doing comic books, none of that applied. It's all First Amendment protected. You're advertising a publication, they could do as much animation as they wanted, and they did. And they trusted kids to make the connection. And they did, and G.I. Joe was a huge hit. So, Marvel Comics and Marvel Productions, which were two separate but related companies, were brought on board to relaunch G.I. Joe. Jim Shooter came up with the basic premise. Larry Hama came up with the bios for the characters, their special abilities, their personalities, and he wrote the comic book. And it was a huge success, so much so that in 1983, they came to television and they did a 5-episode miniseries for G.I. Joe. It was written by, there it is, 5-episode, week-long, thrilling miniseries. It was written by the late, great Ron Friedman. And it was syndicated. They shopped it around. They ran it as Monday through Friday. Huge success. G.I. Joe, everything that Kirk could have imagined and more. It was exactly what they wanted. They created their own fantasy. So they'd apply that formula to the Transformers. So they brought this they brought in Bob Jackson to write the bios and get into the comic. Eventually he wrote the comic. And George Arthur-Bloom, who wrote the 3-episode miniseries. So they had all this ready to go in 1983, moving into 1984. And then Toy Fair comes along. And when Toy Fair first started, they were advertising it as there will be a miniseries in September and December. It's the 3-episode More Than Meets Jack. That was the plan going into Toy Fair. So going into February 13th, 1984, Hasbro thought they were all ready. They said, okay, we got 3 episodes, that should be good. And then Transformers overperforms beyond anyone's imagination at Toy Fair. Toy Fair was a 10-day event. And by the end of it, they knew that they needed to capitalize on the success of Transformers. They could not do just 3 episodes. They'd won 84. They had their eye on 85. So they wanted to do a full season. And before even the end of Toy Fair, so Toy Fair ran from February 23rd to February 22nd. And on February 22nd, Jeffrey Scott, I love this photo of him. Jeffrey Scott was brought in to write a treatment for what a Transformers network series might look like. So, and again, if you look at the dates, like Toy Fair is still going on when he has his handwritten notes from what Hasbro wants. They brought him in, he worked with Hank Sorayama. He was at Marvel, and the idea was that they were going to pitch this to CBS. They'd done it before. The Dungeons and Dragons show had been a co-production, and that had run on CBS, so they knew what CBS was looking for. And that's what they made to create. So the first draft of the Bible was ready by the 25th of September. That's 3 days later.
February 25th.
February 25th, 1984. So he turned this thing around fast. You know, I'm not going to, it's a 22-page Bible. I'm not going to go through the entire thing, but I'm going to pull out some of what I think are the interesting highlights of it. So the basic premise that he came up with was divorced from what Jim Shooter had come up with and what was going to be in the Transformers miniseries. So the idea was that there was a neutron star at the other side of the galaxy with 14 planets circling it. There was so much intense gravity that what evolved there was mechanical life. The Decepticons were villains on this planet, but they were defeated, their bodies destroyed, and they fled, it's not Cybertron, they fled this unnamed robotic planet on the other side of the
What
galaxy.
bodies?
They didn't have bodies. They were glowing energy spheres that could possess Earth machinery. So they settled, and all of this is available online. All of the primary sources, all of the Bibles, all of the memos, they're online at the Sunbow Marvel Archive. I'll put up a link to it later. But you can read all of this yourself. You know, I'm giving you the highlights. But they found, they made themselves a base under the Bermuda Triangle, and slowly, over the course of 50 years, started to steal Earth bodies from airplanes, from ships. Megatron was going to be an experimental Soviet particle beam cannon. And they inspired the legends of the Bermuda Triangle and the mystery around it. So the Autobots, who were portrayed as a space marshal type force, came to Earth with a TH, to try and hunt down the Decepticons and stop them from causing mischief. And they decided to stay in secret so as not to disturb the normal development of Earth. Think the Prime Directive, Star Trek. They noted that when damaged Transformers would be mode locked, they could convert back and forth. They noted that they would grow tired or low on fuel. They specifically noted that they would have robotically synthesized voices, but when they are human vehicles, they would sound more human, more relatable. The core cast of Autobots was going to be Optimus Prime, the space marshal type. His trailer, they noted, was going to be the Autobots headquarters. That's where they were going to hang out.
And they all fit inside. Let's say they all fit inside the trailer as they go around.
Sure, why not?
It's a great image, isn't it? Jazz is going to be with 3 Z's. Oh, I only wrote 2. Well, he had 3 Z's, and he was, I got this wrong. I did the typo. He had 3 Z's in this Bible, and he was going to be the impulsive second in command. He had a rivalry with Starscream because he wrecked her original body. Back and might be some foreshadowing. So Bumblebee wasn't called Bumblebee. He was going to be called Toad. He was going to be a green Volkswagen bug. And he was going to be a wreck. Only breaking down. The comic relief of the group. So they noticed he would get stuck partway through his transformation, run into things, get speeding tickets. And then there were some other, I think there were other ones, but they're not listed here. The Decepticons. So Megatron, like I said, he's a top secret experimental Soviet particle beam cannon. So he could shrink down to the size of a pistol or be a full-size cannon. And he had a pulsating canister full of those glowing orbs with countless Decepticon life essences inside. Soundwave, who was noted to be red, was going to be the second in command, but he believed he should be the leader. So that was Starscream was going to be a woman. Because CBS wanted female characters. They wanted that male-female dynamic. Starscream was going to have a heat ray in one arm and a 0K freeze ray in the other. The color was changed to white. And this is directly a screenshot from the Bible. As her name is
Weird.
I'm sorry. It's the source. It gets very the source material we have. Thundercracker was the strong, silent type, and he had 2 twin tractor beams that he would use to yank people around. Skywarp was blinded by rage because he'd been in prison for thousands of years, and he wielded a warp ray to justify his name, which created a wrinkle in space-time. And although at the time the color of Thundercracker was sort of olive drab, they changed it to black, which may or may not have played a role in Hasbro eventually changing the toy to black. We don't really know one way or the other.
Now one thing you missed on the Autobots, just to fill in some of the gaps. So there's the whole side swipe bit.
Yes.
Yes. So
I think I'm missing a slide on the other Autobot. But
there we go. We'll fill it in.
Yeah.
So side swipe, female, and Mirage. So there's Jazz, Sideswipe, Trailbreaker, and I'd say Jazz, Sideswipe, Trailbreaker, and Mirage. Those are the 4 main Autobots. There is this weird kind of love triangle thing where Sideswipe and Prime, but then Mirage likes Sideswipe. So it's weird stuff. But then the other funny thing about it is it says, oh yeah, there's also Ironhide, Hound, Prowl, and Ratchet. They're just kind of bit characters. We'll bring them to the forefront when we need them.
Yeah, when and if we need them, we'll
They'll just be in the background. So they're background characters.
But yeah, again, picture this as a Saturday morning network cartoon from the 80s. They were going to have their core team that we're going to really zero in on, and sort of everything else was ancillary. And then the humans that they were conceived of included William Duke Conroy, who was a trucker whose rig got possessed by Optimus Prime. He was specifically noted as a Han Solo type, and he was much more worried that Optimus would get damaged in battle than cost him the ability to make money. But he was an expert mechanic, he knew the roads, solid, all-American type. And then there was Wendy Fairchild, an ordinary Midwestern teen, and Toad was her car, which caused her no end of trouble. She was torn between, just wanting a normal teenage life and wanting to help out the Autobots. And then there was Arthur Kroll. You want to talk about Arthur Kroll? I love Arthur Kroll.
He's kind of the Arthur, the Arthur Berger? The bad guy.
Sean Berger.
Sean Berger. Yeah, he's the one that wanted power for himself, and so he teamed up with the Decepticons to go and plunder and find all the resources of turning all of the mechanical pieces of Earth into Decepticons. It was basically their little robot army that they could build up.
And he had 5 episode premises in this first Bible. There was one called Rotten to the Core, where Megatron tries to take over the New York subway system. There's one called The Titanium Germ, where he tries to take over an oil platform, and Jazz gets exposed to a biomechanical pathogen. They got to cure him. Anything for a friend. So the Decepticons take over a nuclear submarine, and Optimus tries to put his life essence into a mothballed battleship, and it goes badly. And Duke has to help, mind meld with him to try and save him and defeat this new submarine. Not on a first date. When his date is interrupted, when the cons try to take over a Japanese electronics factory.
I like this. They took over a Japanese electronics factory, and the girl from the Midwest and her car hear about it. So instead of going on her date, Toad takes off to Japan with her to save her.
I think that's human trafficking, right?
We need to turn off the recording now.
Time for trouble. The Decepticons take over a top secret time machine. Arthur Kroll sneaks them in, and obviously this is very menacing. So that was the pitch, and there's actually concept art that was created for this from the day. So you can see Duke inside Optimus' chest. You can see Wendy and Toad in the green VW model. So they actually got at least that far. So this is from back in the day. Do we have a question?
I think there's 3 laser beams.
Yeah. There's three
In
ladies.
the original Diaclones that they could do that.
Yeah, that very well might have been something that was inspiring them. So then this was shopped around. It was brought to Hasbro and CBS, and from what we can tell, Hasbro hated it. lot. There's a lot of notes and revisions. CBS had some specific notes, and Jeffrey, being a professional, he took these meetings March 1st. So again, keep these timelines in mind. These are very, very compressed timelines. And he came up with a second draft of the Bible on March 7th. So 6 days later, after getting the feedback. Now this version of the Bible is going to take place after the More Than Meets the Eye miniseries. They were more cognizant. They had access to Bob's Bible and character profiles at this point, so it's a lot more consistent with what we know. But there's still some major deviations. This is the first page right here. This is the first page right here. But the new premise of the show is that there's a time jump. They call it a 5-year time jump to 1988, so they weren't great with math. But the Decepticons have conquered the Earth since the end of the miniseries. They rule all of the planet, and they've turned it into a vast industrial factory to create new Decepticons. They have a giant fortress in the Rocky Mountains, but they acknowledge that the humans need food and transportation and fuel and sleep, so they allow life on Earth to continue, but under Decepticon dominion. There's still an economy, but the Decepticons are everywhere. Remember, they're not limited to to just the original 9 or so bad guys. They're making new Decepticons all the time. So anything, your tape recorder could be a Decepticon. The traffic light could be a Decepticon.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they basically said Megatron carried they didn't call them sparks, the orbs of Decepticons, and you would just shoot them into things and they'd transform into these Decepticons.
Well, that was the first Bible.
That was the first Bible.
They dropped that for this one.
Sorry.
They dropped that because now they're just making new ones.
Yes.
Now they're just making new ones. But the Autobot Squad has been revised. Now, one of the specific notes from Hasbro was they didn't want the product to be female. They said, if CBS needs there to be women on the team, make new characters. So that's going to inform what we see. So you have Optimus, Jazz, Mirage, and Trailbreaker as more or less using Bob Budiansky's profiles for them. So they're and I got 3 Z's on Jazz, so I did that right. Bumblebee has been reimagined as Muffler, a pink VW bug that Wendy has bought in a used car lot while he was hiding there.
Bobby Bees?
Yeah. It's funny how these ideas come back around. Now he's not a jalopy anymore. Now he's a klutz in robot mode. These are all based on specific notes from Hasbro. One of the notes was the name Toad is no good. Now probably what Hasbro meant was use Bumblebee, but that's not what Jeffrey Scott took from it. He took Toad is no good. I'll come up with another new name. So Muffler, or Muffy, as Wendy likes to call him, is a klutzy bot. And that was another note. Don't make the car a broken down car, presumably because they wanted kids to think it was cool. So they said that he could be a nerd, not a wreck. And then there was Fire Cycle, a level-headed turbocharged motorcycle. She's the team's medic and deeply in love with Optimus Prime. So they kept that story up. But remember Starscream's 0K Chill Blaster and Heat Ray? Those have been given to her now because I think she really liked those powers and kept them in the character that he made. She's so unwilling to harm living things, she doesn't even like walking on grass.
Why does she have such weapons?
Well, it's a freeze ray, right? And it's a cartoon, so presumably you could freeze someone and they'd be fine after you thaw them out.
Is she the reason Optimus has roller? We all know that little guy's technically his child.
So it's interesting, in this version of the Bible, they said, so Optimus Prime, they said Optimus was actually the cab, Prime was the little roller, and then the trailer was what was it? It was just basically a repair bay with the arms that could lift people up and lift Transformers up and fix them. So he thought of it as the 3, distinct entities, but one was called Optimus, one was called Prime or Roller, and the other one was just the repair bay.
Yeah. So this is not vintage art. This is fan art There's a reason that we do this. This is by Andrew Turnbull. By Andrew Turnbull. But there is a reason that we use this specific design, and we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We also have some fan art by Ed Perry for Fireside. Again, not vintage art. This is modern art that we've made based on the designs.
Hasbro, when are we gonna get her?
Let them know. Tweet it out. Let them know. So that's by Ed Perry.
Yes.
Now the Earth natives, their human companions have been tweaked a little bit. So he's no longer called William Duke Conroy. Now he's Matt Conroy. And again, there was a note from Hasbro saying the name Duke is no good. And they didn't say why, but I mean it's pretty obvious why. So he had found a broken big rig by the side of the road and fixed it up. And only then realized that it was a mechanical man from Mars, as he calls the Autobots. He's still called the Han Solo type of group. A down-home American who has more important things to do than save the world, like make a living. And then there's Bert. Bert is the faithful German shepherd of Matt. And his faithful nose, his incredible nose, could sniff out Decepticons even in their alternate mode.
It's like Outback's Decepticon detector, but in dog form.
But it really works. Unlike Outback's, yes, which is BS. Wendy is still there, although now her parents are unwilling Decepticon factory workers. But they've added a little brother, Eddie Fairchild, who's now about 10. And he loves the Autobots. He thinks they're really exciting. Wants to tag along. He's totally oblivious to the danger that he constantly puts himself in.
Like little brothers.
Like little brothers are, yes. Yes, Jeffrey Scott very well might have a younger sibling. And Arthur Krell is still there, which I'm not sure what his role is since they've already conquered the Earth, but presumably he's the Quizzling type. So, and the main Decepticon forces, the leader of the Decepticons is Negator. Negator, if you read the Bible, is very much Megatron with the serial numbers filed off. He's got the black hole he can connect to. It's drawing very heavily on Bob's version of Megatron, but they've changed the name. Now they don't say why, but reading between the lines, between this and the first draft, it seems clear that CBS did not want a handgun to be a main character, but Hasbro didn't want someone named Megatron not to look an awful lot like the Megatron toy. So they've come up with this new character, the Gator. I don't have documentation to specifically support this, but to me it seems very clearly sort of a Jetfire, Skyfire situation. Yeah. They're going with a very similar character, probably a very similar but different design, and trusting kids to kind of make the connection. And if you want to play with Negator, you'll just buy the Megatron figure. And he turned into a satellite particle beam cannon. Soundwave, Buzzsaw, Starscream, Thundercracker, Skywalker, these are very similar to what they were like in the miniseries, Starscream back being male, but they've introduced Whirlpool to be their female member of the Decepticon team. She's a former Autobot, and she's determined, her main motivation is that she wants to offline Optimus Prime to kind of prove to herself that she made the right decision to defect. They note that she can be seductive and charming. She can even sort of breezily convince Autobots that she might be on their side. And she's noted as converting into an amphibious assault vehicle, but she can extend her blades into a helicopter form or retract them to become a submersible form.
She's actually a quadruple changer, I believe.
Yeah, although maybe more like the Omnibots in terms of, not like for full-on transformation.
Tracks can fly.
Yeah,
but he still has the
those
car.
lines. Along those lines. She can create Whirlpool, and she fires twin implosion torpedoes that suck everything in a several hundred-mile radius into a compressed mass. And we want to make some fan art for her as well. This is Ed Perry.
Nice pontoons.
Pontoons. Yes, I could make a dirty joke and I won't, because I'm classy like that. And he came up with 13 episode premises. So he reused 4 of the ones from the last Bible. And then there's the erasing of Optimus Prime, where Negator captures Optimus Prime and starts to erase his memory tapes. So they have to get them and restore Optimus Prime to his full personality.
Sounds like
So like the chip episode?
It sounds a little bit like it, doesn't it?
We need a floppy disk.
Yeah, well, that would solve everything.
Sherlock Holmes with floppy disk.
Yeah, well, I mean, floppy disk would have been radically new technology.
They saved
It worked in the Marvel comic.
They saved Optimus's soul in a floppy disk.
Why wouldn't that work?
And can be easily ripped in half, too.
There's the plutonium plot where Negator realizes that to defeat the Autobots, he just has to starve them of fuel. And the Autobots wind up breaking into a nuclear power plant to get the energy that they need. A cold day in December where Negator wants to use a diamond steel alloy. And it's going to take all the coal in Pennsylvania. The coldest winter in centuries.
These are very deep plots. He's going to freeze them by taking the coal, make the diamonds, and everyone can't keep their homes.
Nobody home. Wendy and Eddie return, were the popular studies, and the king and the queen of the crown. Wendy and Eddie return home to find their parents missing, whisked away to a distant factory to work on a new breed of mind-controlling Decepticons. Operation Alpha Centauri, Negator's space fleet is ready and he's ready to start conquering the galaxy, but fortunately, a rogue human scientist has built a ship for the Autobots and a Star Warsian space battle ensues. Star Warsian, yeah. It's an adjective.
A lot of these premises were based on, in reference like the rebels in Star Wars. Like the rebels in Star Wars. That was what the Autobots were.
So the robot with 1,000 eyes, the Autobots want to hijack a shipment of optical components that will allow the completion of another 100 Decepticon warriors. It's noted as being like out of the Old West, so I like to think it was a train heist. The script, the premise doesn't specify. A new muffler, so the Decepticons capture Muffler and replace him with a clone. But the Autobots realize it because he's not klutzy enough. And the 13th episode that they had listed was A Deadly Decision. There's a severe battle. The Autobots are all injured, and there's not enough components to fix all of them. Somebody's going to die, and Optimus is insisting it be him, which is filling everyone with consternation. So, can they get the parts in time to save him, or will Optimus sacrifice himself? Yeah. Now, if you're good on math, you might have noticed that's only 12 episodes. There was also a pilot script called A Robot's Best Friend is His Dog. And in this pilot, Bert's ability to sniff out Decepticons is explored in much greater depth. So, and Scott wrote the full-on episode. We have a beat outline for it, and we have the full script for it. And we also have vintage concept art. The Instagram user Consume Collectibles dug up Muffy art, Muffy and Wendy Fairchild art. So this is all from back in the day. So this should give you an idea of sort of what tone they were shooting for, if the episode summaries already didn't. There's Bert and Matt and Eddie. There you go. Happy birthday, Muffy. So this is why we drew our pink Muffy with this design. So this was the design, the vintage design we pitched. Now, realistically, they would have gone with the actual. They would never let them call him Muffler. They would have called him Bumblebee, and they would have used the design that they already had. But because we had the vintage concept art, we thought it was fun to sort of showcase that. And then, Margaret Loesch became the new president of Marvel Productions, and she brought in Bryce Malek and Nick Robbins, who were over at Hanna-Barbera with her. They put together a new Transformers proposal to syndicate the whole thing, which is ultimately the direction they did. They brought production in-house. They did not go through a network, presumably because there were too many compromises, you know, the Negator and whatnot, and the sort of characters that didn't have toys involved, and they went in the direction that we all know.
All hail Margaret Loesch!
Now, I'm noting that a lot of this artwork dates all the way back to 1985. So there was a Comics Feature magazine in '85 that had both that first Bible pitch document with the green toad and some of the Muffy concept art, of which we have more. Jeffrey Scott mentioned online in his own resume that he had worked on a Transformers pilot and Bible, so we knew that this existed. We had no idea what it was, so we spent years and years and years trying to track it down, and eventually we bought it off Jeffrey Scott himself on eBay. And there were also internal Marvel documents from Malik and Robbins that mentioned a few plot details. So we knew the name Matt Conroy and Eddie Fairchild. We didn't know anything about him, but we knew the name. And we knew that they had considered using a disabled character and ultimately rejected that idea. But so little things we knew, but not a lot. The immediate impact was low. Chip Chase was an idea that they lifted directly from that Bible pitch document. The idea that the Decepticons had an underwater base probably came out of that. In the comics they wound up with their Bermuda base. Specifically, in the cartoon, it was their underwater fortress from the crashed ship.
No one's really disabled as long as he has courage.
Exactly. But I will note that a lot of nobody had access to these documents. Hasbro didn't have it sitting in this was in a drawer in Jeffrey Scott's. So everything that I'm about to talk about is basically just coincidence. But a lot of the ideas that they came up with sort of wound up getting echoed in later stuff. The idea that Bumblebee would be purchased in a used car lot by their human companion happened twice. The idea of a former Autobot joining the Decepticons as a sort of femme fatale seductress comes up. The idea of glowing orbs that can animate Transformers' life came up. The idea that that a human companion would find this truck and bond with it came up more than once. You have Jinrai in Japan, you have Kate Yeager in the movies, and many other ideas are sort of coincidentally echoed. So I find it fascinating. Although the ideas, it's a great premise, the idea that the Decepticons have conquered the Earth, even if the tone, I think, is very silly. But the idea that Scott would focus on the hidden aspect, that robots disguised could be anywhere, the wonder of that, the paranoia of that. I think he was really going back to core first principles, especially on that first Bible. And I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas in there.
It's really Orwellian. 1984, eyes are everywhere.
Now, I have time for about one or two questions before I get to the next part of the thing. So do we have any very quick questions?
Right.
Yeah.
Why was Cliff Jumper killed off so many times?
I can't answer that. And he wasn't in this. What about over there?
So, was Buddy Ansky and the CBS writers like butting heads, or were they supposed to work together?
I don't think they were butting heads so much as I suspect for the first draft, Scott didn't have access to what Bob did. Think about the timeline. Think how rushed it was. I think they just didn't get him the documents, and Scott came out with this Bible in 3 days. I have one in the back, and then I'm going to move on with the presentation. Oh, come on up and get a script.
For those that ask questions, come up and you can have the choice of the first Bible, second draft Bible.
But this is going to be the last question because then I'm going to move on to something kind of exciting.
Ask a question, get a prize.
Did anyone hear me?
I wasn't-
Alright, mine's very specific as heck, but like for Wheeljack, was there any like earlier versions of him besides him being like the nerdy science guy?
Wheeljack's not in any of these
So
documents.
he was until later on then.
Yeah,
it wasn't mentioned here.
Well, Bob had done a Wheeljack profile, but Jeffrey Scott is.
Was him and one more question, no, stop. Him and Ratchet for G1, were they always the idea for them to build the Dinobots? Was that always like a day one or like
No, that
was many drafts?
That came, the Dinobots weren't even licensed at this point.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
All right. So, all of these documents are available for download. Ryan and I work on the Sunbow Marvel Archive. We believe in finding these documents, scanning them, and sharing them so you can read them yourself. If you want to take a scan, you can just do a Google search for the Sunbow Marvel Archive, and I'll leave these up for a sec.
It's a great resource of early material, marketing material, scripts, background material.
It's got the early draft of the Transformers movie, the final draft of the Transformers movie, the intermediate draft, lots of storyboards. It's not just Transformers, we got Joe stuff and Team Gem stuff, yeah.
And in the storyboards, they even have like cut scenes that you never actually got in the cartoons. So it's a great resource to just check out.
Now, I want to mention TF Nation. Yeah, you go. I want to mention TF Nation. TF Nation is Europe's largest Transformers con, and they're co-presenting this next part of the script. So when TF Nation did what we're about to see, they did it for charity. So they asked that we consider doing something for charity here. So Donald F. Glutt was a G.I. Joe and Transformers writer who did the novelization for Empire Strikes Back. He's a guest at this con. He's currently in some financial distress. But in terms of Transformers, he wrote Divide and Conquer. He wrote SOS Dinobots. He wrote War of the Dinobots. He wrote Heavy Metal War, a lot of Dinobots. He wrote Autobot Spike. He wrote Dinobot Island Part 1 and Part 2. He wrote Megatron's Master Plan Part 1 and 2. He wrote the Autobot Run. He wrote Masquerade. He wrote The Call of the Primitives. He did a lot of stuff. So consider, if you're enjoying what we're about to see, doing a donation. So remember I said there was a full script written for A Robot's Best Friend is His Dog? So for TF Nation, we recorded a full-on script reading for A Robot's Best Friend is His Dog. That's what some of that concept art was for. The opening sequence is by Andrew Turnbull and Chris Carter. The character designs are by Ed Peary and Andrew Turnbull. There's additional artwork by Andrew. The logo's by Ed. The script adaptation was by YouTube's Chris McFeely. It was produced and edited by David Wallace. The vocal talents include Evan Michael Lee, who's here. Greg Berger, who's here. Jeremy Levy. Neil Kaplan, who's here. Paul Iden, who's here. Frank Tornaro, who's in the audience. Oh yeah, no, I told him he was going to be here. He said, I'm not going to miss it. Brandon Hardiker, Kimi Lanchek, David Kay, Lauren K. Levy, Chris Finney, Deanna McGovern, Joe Powell, Chris Carter, Gavin Spence, Andrew Turnbull, James Sorensen, who's my son, Jim Sorensen, and Chris McFeely. So, without further ado, I present A Robot's Best Friend is His Dog. Now remember, where did it go? Here it is. Give me that. Yeah, oh, and I'm going to say, please, no recording. Please, no recording for this segment. It eventually will wind up on YouTube, but let me get the minimal view, and let's do it. Now remember, this is a goofy script from a goofy Saturday morning cartoon. I hope you enjoy it. So that's what could have been. Here comes to the greatness of Margaret Louis. Thank you very much. I'll be around all weekend. Stick around, because there's a movie coming up. I don't even know what it is.
No. We're not good.
If anybody wants a copy of the Bibles or the script, it's about to sit there.
We're going to take a few minutes, and then we're going to actually decide all together what Transformers movie we're going to be watching.
Oh.